Hello and welcome to The Pulse. Coming up, Supreme Court orders Parliament to expunge James Jachikwasin's name from its records as Member of Parliament for Assin North, as it rules that he failed to renounce his Canadian citizenship at the time of filing his nomination. We tell you what this means for him, his party and Parliament. Also coming up, we take you to Nigeria, where the election petition has been ongoing today. We'll also take you to the Volta region this afternoon, where we are told about 66% of women there are drinking alcohol excessively. We'll find out why. We've got details of these and more here on The Pulse with me, Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah. You want to stay for details. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Kukumlemle, also on DSTV channel 421 and other digital platforms, also online on myjoyonline.com. Thanks for joining me on The Pulse. Now, is James Jachikwasin still going to fight? Well, this afternoon, the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, has ruled that the Electoral Commission was wrong to have even allowed Mr. Kwasin to run as a parliamentary candidate in Assin North in the first place. And he did that on the ticket of the opposition NDC. Now, the court wants Parliament to expunge his name from its records. It means he will no longer be recognized as having ever been a member of Parliament. This afternoon, we break down the complex issues surrounding this case. We'll also hear from the NDC and the NPP. First, though, let's speak to court correspondent Joseph Akable, who's followed this case since it started. Joseph, let's start by running us through exactly how this case started, how it traveled through the various courts, finally culminating in this verdict.
In fact, it's been a matter that has been in the court for a while now, but it all started sometime in October of 2020 when James Jachikwasin filed his nomination or picked up nomination forms from the Electoral Commission to contest as NDC parliamentary candidate for Assin North. We know that a petition was sent to the Electoral Commission at that stage. The Electoral Commission cleared him to contest the 2020 polls. Later on, just before the election, after the election was conducted, we know he emerged victorious in that particular election when he beat the MPP's candidate to become the Member of Parliament. Just before the swearing-in was done, we know the swearing-in was on January 7. The lawyers for Michael Nkuman, who describes himself as a constituent of Assin North, initiated steps to have him injuncted from being sworn in as a Member of Parliament. You recall that on January 7, 2021, during the swearing-in, the Parliament's attention was drawn to that particular injunction that had been obtained from the court. And the minority side, at that time, the NDC side, because there was no majority and minority at that point in time, took the view that they will allow him to participate in the voting of the Speaker because if there are any consequences, he's going to bear the consequence as an individual. And so that disrupted Parliament a bit, but eventually he was allowed to participate in that voting for the Speaker. Right after that particular process, we know that in July 2021, a High Court at Cape Coast ruled that he was not qualified to contest the polls when it came to the conclusion that he did not renounce his citizenship at the time of filing a nomination form to contest the parliamentary polls. We know that his lawyers had argued that he had put in the process and that because of the COVID-19 and the issues surrounding that, he didn't get the certificate. So that had been the argument all throughout, but the High Court had disagreed with that. Then they proceeded to take the matter to the Court of Appeal. At a point in time, the Court of Appeal struck out the matter and delisted it. The lawyers went all the way to the Supreme Court to try and get it relisted. They lost on all those matters. Then came that application that was taken to the Supreme Court in January of 2022. That was an application again by lawyers for Michael Nkuman, simply asking the Supreme Court to declare that upon a true and proper interpretation of Article 94(2)(a) of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, James Jachikwasin, at the time of filing his nomination form in October of 2020, was not qualified to contest as a Member of Parliament. This constitutional provision simply says that a person shall not be qualified to be a Member of Parliament if he owes allegiance to another country other than Ghana. And so their argument was that once his renunciation certificate had not come in at the time he filed to contest, then it meant that he was not eligible to contest. Even before the Supreme Court dealt with a substantive matter, they filed an application for injunction, saying to the Supreme Court that even before you give your final judgment, we think that every single day that he stays in Parliament, the Constitution is breached, and that you are the constitutional court, you are the highest court of the land, you cannot allow a breach to happen. That was in April of 2022. The Supreme Court, by a majority 5-2 decision, we knew that Justices Amegacha and Agnes Doji, who has now retired and was replaced on this particular panel, dissented. But the 5-member panel, the majority took the view that he should be restrained from performing functions as a member of Parliament. And so in actual sense, since April 2022, Asin North have been without a member of Parliament because he was barred from attending Parliament, presenting himself or holding himself out as member of Parliament. The court at that time assured that he was going to expeditiously deal with the matter, but we know that the case has been outstanding from April 2022 till today that we are speaking, May 17, 2023, where the Supreme Court has delivered its final judgment on this particular matter, Bernice.
Joseph, let's zero in on events in court today. How exactly did it transpire, and what was the reaction of both sides to the decision by the Supreme Court?
In fact, Justice John Doche, the presiding judge for this particular matter, the incoming or the newly nominated Chief Justice, Justice Tokodisus on this panel, the court, in a unanimous 7-0 decision, made the following conclusion. The first was that he was not eligible to contest the post, and as a result, his election was null and void and of no effect. The court also concluded that the Electoral Commission acted unconstitutionally in allowing him to contest the post without seeing his renunciation certificate. The court therefore also proceeded to conclude that his swearing in that was carried out by Parliament was also null and void and of no effect, and then proceeded to issue the directive to Parliament asking that his name is expunged from its records. And so that was the conclusion that Justice Jones Doche read. Lawyers for James Jachikwesin, led by Chachuchikata in open court, simply stated that as the court pleases. But afterwards, we know that they were locked in a meeting, and we understand there are even subsequent meetings that will be taking place to decide the next line of action. But for lawyers for Michael and Kuman Infan, led by Frank Davis, this is a good decision, and they expect that as a matter of natural consequences, steps should be afoot for by-election to take place in Asin North.
And Joseph, as we speak, we haven't heard anything from the Electoral Commission, have we?
No, but the Commission's lawyers were actually in court represented by Seth Amankwa, who represented the Commission in this particular matter. And so the Commission, as we are expected to know, are much aware of this decision. But as we've seen happen in time past, the procedure is that the Speaker of Parliament directs the clerk to write to the Electoral Commission, informing them of a vacancy, and then the processes take place for the EC announces the by-election. But there a lot can happen in between now, because we know that previously when attempts were made to serve the court order on Parliament, and the Speaker of Parliament had cause to comment on it, he said he was not going to declare the seat vacant because there were pending legal processes involved in this particular matter. We do not know whether between now and whenever Parliament reconvenes, whether lawyers for James Jachikwesin will be filing perhaps for a review, and whether when the Speaker of Parliament is seized with this particular matter, it will mean that he may take the view again that because of the review that has been filed, once the Supreme Court delivers its judgment, the only option is for a review. And that is done, it will mean that maybe the Speaker will take the view again that because of the pending process, he may not proceed to declare the seat vacant. But we know that there's also a pending criminal case, independent of what is happening at the Constitutional Court, which has been brought to a finality today, against James Jachikwesin, where he's been accused of committing forgery and perjury in the form that he signed, the declaration, the statutory declaration that he signed in terms of submitting his nomination form to say that he did not owe any allegiance to any other country.
And Joseph, what is the status of that case?
It's actually at the very initial levels where witnesses are now just about coming in to begin to give their testimony. And so there were a number of initial applications that came in that went all the way up to the Supreme Court and then back again. So that is how come that case has not progressed very much.
Okay, so for those who are asking questions, especially on social media, because we know what has happened in times past with persons who were found to have dual citizenship and holding office as members of parliament. That meant they served a jail term. So for those of you who may not be following the issues keenly, Joseph has just explained the criminal matter is still in the initial stages. This is a civil case which the Supreme Court has ruled over. Let me now bring in Abraham Amaliba. He is a member of the NDC's legal team. James Jachikwesin belongs to that party and was in Parliament on the ticket of that party. Mr. Amaliba, good afternoon to you. How is the party taking this decision?
Well, it appears people are running ahead of time. This matter, I have indicated to the media already that this matter is not conclusive. It's not yet ended. There's a possibility of a review.
Right.
And if there's a review, the orders of the court will not apply until the review is heard.
Is there going to be a review? We understand there's been a meeting since the verdict was delivered a couple of hours ago. We understand lawyers of Mr. Jachikwesin have been locked up in a meeting. Are you aware if the decision is to review?
I am unaware of such a meeting because I am the Director of Legal Affairs. This is going on. I'm not aware of it, but I can only tell you what the law allows. So the law allows for a review. And if that decision is taken to go for a review, we haven't seen the end of it, as your reporter is seeking to put across. Apart from that, I have a challenge why the Supreme Court should take up this matter, because as we are all aware, parliamentary petitions, if you are challenging the eligibility of a parliamentary candidate, it ends at the Court of Appeal. So we will take the judgment, look at it, and then we'll be in a better position to respond. But for now, it is clear that we haven't seen the end of the matter yet.
Mr. Amaliba, are you questioning the capacity of the Supreme Court to sit over this matter?
I am saying that, yes, that as we are aware, the law is clear. Parliamentary petitions end at the Court of Appeal. So I want to know, and that's what I'm saying, that I want to see the judgment. So I want to know how the Supreme Court took charge of it. And so that's my point. So that's what I can say now.
Okay, so you say that you're not aware of a meeting that's happening with Mr. Jachikwesin's lawyers, but as a party, since the news broke of the Supreme Court's verdict, what has happened after that? Have there been any meetings scheduled?
Officers are on their way to Kobewu.
Okay.
Officers have not met yet. The legal team has not met yet. This just took place some 3 hours ago, isn't it? So you shouldn't expect that people were already sitting at the round table waiting for the judgment. So by close of day, we will know the way forward.
Right. I appreciate your time here this afternoon. Abraham Amaliba is Director of Legal Affairs for the NDC, and he's not able to tell us emphatically if there will be a review of the decision by the Supreme Court, but he did spell out the fact that the law permits for that to happen. I was hoping to get some concrete answers, but he says it's early days yet, and so the party will be meeting and will give us a decision subsequently. Well, we will be bringing you more on this. Hopefully, we're hoping to get some more reactions on this developing story. But today on Climate Focus, we visit Techiman, where a mathematics teacher has transformed what was known as a criminal hideout into a modern urban green space. 42-year-old Max Olopong of Kesi Basahia Senior High School in Techiman sought permission from the Municipal Assembly to convert an insanitary forest place close to the Municipal Library into new-looking gardens. He's combining his mathematical knowledge with his passion for environmental protection to preserve the site for future generations. JoyNews' Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin has more.
Math student, and later I went to the university to do maths. So I don't have my knowledge about agric. Agric was a general course at SS. but I haven't done a great.
Back at the Yoso College of Education, Maxwell was one of the compound overseers, a role that brought him into contact with the campus gardener.
As I told you, I developed interest in flower buckets as a compound overseer, and I decided that I should do something. So I was teaching I started at two bottom. One education director is also having a place with this kind of trees there. So I met him and he told me that it's also an art student and he likes nature. So he encouraged me, one Mr. Asha, that when I keep nature, it has a lot of benefit. So from there, then I developed more interest. So when I see flowers, I didn't even know most of the plant name. When I see and I go to Kumasi, most of the gardens are at Kumasi. So when I go, oh, what's the name of this plant? How do you propagate it? Some will tell you that you can't do it. Then I started learning from the internet.
Maxwell began the garden at his home before relocating it to the forest near the Techimai Library.
This garden was established in 2018, but the trees here were planted as far back as 1991. It was under instruction of the chief of Techimai, and the youth of Ahimfi planted the trees. So here was bushy, and it was the responsibility of the assembly to weed here anytime here is busy. So 2028, I contacted the municipal assembly that I want to make here a nice place, a garden in which people can come around and sit here anytime they want. So as the assembly gave me the go ahead, and I established this garden. So here I purposely nest most of my flowers here, and other tree plants we plant around people's houses, organization, so that we use this green to help reduce the effect of the climate change.
Despite several environmental benefits, community gardens are a type of green infrastructure that is sometimes disregarded in urban climate change and development plans. The lower urban heat highlands provide ecosystem services and improve storm water retention. Today, the forest location provides a safe and serene atmosphere for students and event organizers. It also supplies seedlings of various types to homeowners who want to cultivate ornamental plants in their homes. Maxwell explains how many seedlings he produces for the general public.
For the flowers, it's seasonal work. During rain season, from April, March, April going, a day I can sell about 1,000 to 2,000 flowers a day. Bye. It's a seasonal work. During dry season, we just let the flowers and water to wait for the rain season. So it's a seasonal work. And I do contract. As a community, I'm working for the Uni East Regional Protective Council, which is a very big contract we have started. So I take all my flowers from here, I take my green grass, then I go and plant for them. I have places I've planted the green grass to that, I go and take it out and go and plant for them. So in terms of money, it's the flowers that gives money. Actually, yes, helping me a lot. I get a lot because if you compare my annual salary, I can even get one contract that can pay for my whole annual salary.
According to the maths teacher, there is more to nursing flowers than there is to teaching, but he wants to help humanity in both disciplines.
A lot of people, individual houses, I can't count. But for institutions, worked for Akumadine District Assembly. I did the landscaping. Kibodom District Assembly. I did the landscaping. I've done for NIP, that is the institution, and a lot of individual houses. And so I don't only do even the planting. When I go to the house, I'll do the demarcation where there should be a walkway. So I employ masons and other people also to help.
To mention a few, the trees here provide several benefits including shading and cooling urban heat highlands, carbon sequestration, and improved air quality. Comes around on a daily basis to capture the serene atmosphere.
We come, have a beautiful environment, we read together, have breaks, run around the park, enjoy the nature that is here, and then go back home. So most weekends and then on holidays we are here.
As a result of climate change, cities are experiencing record-breaking heat. During instances of intense heat, urban heat highlands frequently form within cities, making them much hotter than their surroundings. Residents like Abdulrazak can now choose Maxwell's new look gardens.
So keeping trees such as this place, I think should be made compulsory. We must have them. For some of us who grew up in the villages, you come to the city and it looks like it's a jungle, concrete everywhere. That is when you even miss home more. But when you have new look gardens and the likes of it, you find life very beautiful. In school we're taught that this reduces effects of climate change. You don't need to read books to understand. When you breathe the air here, it is different. It's a very beautiful place. So we must do these things in our homes, workplaces, everywhere. Keep our places green.
A report by Mohammed Nuruddin.
You're still watching The Pulse with me, Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah. Now to an issue that has been creating conversation since yesterday. The Ghana Road Transport Coordinating Council, GRTCC, is lashing out at transport operators, describing as misplaced agitations over a proposed 10% fare reduction. Now, we know that that directive was supposed to take effect today. The GPRTU and GLTCC, in a statement, said that transport fares were to be reduced by 10% to accommodate for the continuous fall in the prices of petroleum products. That's been an observation over the period. This has been welcomed by some commuters who spoke to JoyNews here in Accra. Some drivers are, however, unhappy about the reduction.
The crisis is there. We are still in a crisis. That's what I think.
Well, if everything was engineered by the politicians, then it is a step in the right direction. But the sustainability is what matters. If they will be able to, hold on to it and then take pragmatic measures in order to, sustain it.
Well, many of the commuters here are so happy that transport fares are going down. Many of the transport operators themselves are not happy with the proposed reduction of 10%.
That 10%, yeah, they have to do more than that. That 10%, we don't see anything of that 10%. That 10% didn't do anything. Because now the economy is there, it's too hard.
Too small. At least 40% or 30%.
We are using engine oil, brake food, spare parts, ties, and other things. So if they say we should reduce it by 10%, they must make sure that those things which I mentioned too should go down by 10%.
We are going to lose totally. It came for first time that we should reduce fare. We reduce it to a certain level. We didn't hear anything about foodstuffs and many other things. Today you are telling us that there is another reduction, so reduce lorry fare.
While commuters and transport operators have divided opinion on the decrease of transport fares in the country, business owners here at Abosokai say they feel no positive impact at all on the exchange rate and other indices in the business they do.
No, I've not seen any positive about it. This one we buy it at 250, but now it's 500 to 550.
So I'm not feeling any impact because the prices of my products is still going up day by day. So I don't think the dollar has come down. It's still rising.
Reporting from Abosoka here in Accra, my name is Carlos Kaloni for Joy.
Let's now go to Kumasi, where my colleague Nana Bwachi Yadom has also been interacting with some commuters.
We heard of
the new rates this morning. We are not happy with the new fares.
I
am not willing to reduce it until they do something about the hardship in the country. We are unable to buy anything in the country. Some of the things we use daily are expensive. I will continue to charge my fare until traders also reduce their prices.
From a hat to macro now, 55. It's 55 now, 55 now. It's almost focal in your own.
Drivers are always asked to reduce their prices. Meanwhile, traders continue to increase the prices of their goods. Why should it always be the drivers? Why should drivers always reduce their fares? What at all have we done wrong?
Break food. First, I break food. I will not say. So 35 cities. I money.
We always fight with our partners. We don't know when the fuel prices will go up again. Authorities must consult us before anything.
Now, how can a radio say, Yatis will be 10%? I mean, you are near or no one will be asking about what you say.
There was so was a entity and Yamasua. One man would be answered the Subi, now MY Kakra Mekano.
All right, so the drivers here are saying that it will be very difficult for them to reduce their fares as issued by GPRTU. This is the Kumasi Tech Junction for Joy News. My name is Nana.
And that was my colleague bringing us reactions from the Ashanti region capital, Kumasi. Away from that story, majority of people infected with rabies in the Ashanti region are dog owners who suffered bites. The region recorded 12 fatal cases last year, with 4 of them recorded in the last quarter. Unfortunately, the cost of rabies vaccines and apathy among dog owners in vaccinating their dogs means many of these dogs are left unvaccinated. Over 6,000 dogs are being targeted in an anti-rabies vaccination exercise in the Bosomtwe district, one of the areas noted for high incidence of dog bites in the region. There's more in the following report by Ohiming Teria.
Rabies infection usually occurs following a deep bite or scratch from an animal with rabies. Transmission to humans by rabid dogs accounts for up to 99% of cases in Ghana. Its transmission can be stopped through vaccination. Asante Achim South, Bosomtwe and Kwabri East are some of the latest districts that recorded rabies cases in 2022. According to the Ghana Health Service, people infected with rabies in the Ashanti region, majority being dog owners who suffered dog bites, have all died. Dr. Mabel Abudu is the regional director of the veterinary services.
We had 77 specimens, and then 38 out of the specimens we received were positive, and then 36 negative. And human involvement were about 43 persons available. But the challenge is that people don't feel the need to pay. It's expensive. When you go to the hinterlands, you may have somebody having about 10-15 dogs. Even if you are charging 10 cedis per dose, and then he's having 150 Ghana cedis, he will not do. So I know all these are adding up to the numbers.
Bosomtwe, one of the rabies endemic districts, recorded 2 rabies deaths from 103 dog bites last year alone. A collaboration between the Ghana Health Service and the veterinary services, with the support of UK-based Mission Rabies, will see 6,000 dogs in the area vaccinated free of charge. A downpour on day 1 of the 2-week exercise will not stop the 7 teams of vaccinators in their door-to-door activities. Dr. Timothy Chumesi Mensah is Health Director for Bosomtwe District.
We are really appreciative of this thing, this support that we are getting from Mission Rabies to vaccinate every dog in this district, and it is free. And that is why it's very important to us. And it's also important because we get a lot of dog bites. Last year, we had 103 dog bites reported in our facilities. And you know, part of our district, they assess health in Kumasi. So we are looking at only those who reported at our facilities. And out of this total number, we had only 2 rabies deaths. Even though it is a lot, we feel that were it not because of this vaccination that has been happening, we might have probably experienced more deaths. That's why, in spite of the rains and everything, we are still out there giving out these free vaccines to every dog in the district.
A pilot project in 2029 in the Bosomtwe District by the Mission Rabies saw the vaccination of over 4,000 dogs. From Kumasi, for JoyNews, Oimintiria reporting.
Now let's cross the borders of Ghana. Ukrainian President Zelensky had a rather intense tour of European capitals in the last few days: Rome, Berlin, Paris and London. His goals were to agree to more weapon deliveries, but also to get a clear commitment from those governments about Ukraine's European perspective. DW's Thomas Sparrow in Berlin joins us with more. Hi, Thomas. Now, what was the background of this tour and what was achieved?
Essentially, what Mr. Zelensky wanted on the short term by visiting these different European capitals was to secure more military help for his country in the war against Russia. And that is something that he achieved, for example, here in Germany. Ahead of the visit, the German government announced a 2.7 billion euro package for Ukraine, described as the biggest military package yet that the German government has offered Ukraine. That was, at least on the short term, the goal that Mr. Zelensky wanted to achieve by visiting several European countries. But the sort of longer goal that he was also clear to express was that idea that Ukraine belongs to the European community, to the European family. And that was evident also, by the way, when he received in the city of Aachen in Western Germany the Charlemagne Prize, which is one of the most important prizes for European unity. And that was something that was clear when he received that prize, that he sees his country as part of the European family, and he wanted some reassurances from European governments that that is also the case. He got the reassurances, but what's not clear yet is how those reassurances will be able to be implemented. So in other words, how long it will take for Ukraine to actually be part of the European family, in particular of the European Union, but also of NATO, the Transatlantic Alliance.
Now, will the new weapons deliveries make a difference in the war? And what about the issue of fighter jets?
It's important that you ask this because, at least from the Ukrainian perspective and also the German perspective, by the way, it is possible that these new weapons deliveries could make a difference. But from the Ukrainian perspective, what really would make a difference, especially considering what could happen in the next few weeks or months in the war, is the delivery of fighter jets. And in this particular case, European governments and also the United States do not necessarily see eye to eye. There are different views on whether they should deliver fighter jets, for example, F-16s. Ukraine would certainly want those deliveries. But there are concerns in European capitals that delivering fighter jets could actually make the war more difficult to resolve. It could make things more difficult on the battlefield. So those are discussions that are being carried out at a European level, and it's being described as a sort of push for a fighter jet coalition. It is unclear when or if that could happen, but that's at least what the Ukrainian government would want, for European capitals, for the United States to deliver fighter jets for Ukraine to make a difference in the battlefield.
Now, just tell us more about what people in these European countries think about the weapons deliveries. Do they support the idea? And what are they saying about an end to them?
If you look, for example, at what's happening here in Germany, there doesn't seem to be a clear majority as to whether these weapons deliveries are good. Many Germans do see that, but there's also a considerable segment of the population that look at this very skeptically, that believe that weapons deliveries could make things more difficult on the battlefield, could actually make the war more intense of helping to resolve issues. And that goes hand in hand with other stats that have been published, where actually, in this case, a majority of Germans would want the German government and other European governments as well to make more efforts on the diplomatic front to make sure that the war could end. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky did stress when he came to Germany that his idea is that the war could end this year. But there are questions indeed coming from different places, including here in Germany, as to that would be achievable, especially considering that idea that more weapons are needed and even more that fighter jets could be the next step in that direction in the war in Ukraine.
Thank you, Thomas. That's DW's Thomas Sparrow joining us from Berlin, giving us some more perspectives to the tour of Ukraine's president in the European region. You're watching Pulse with me, Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah. There's more to come shortly. Just gone by, we brought you a quick update. Supreme case involving James Jachikwason and the expunging of his name from that particular one, and in Parliament. But let's head to Nigeria now from Berlin. My colleague Blessed Soga is joining us from there because there is an election petition there. And Blessed is there to monitor events today. Blessed, what has been happening in Nigeria?
Bernice, if you can hear me, good afternoon from Nigeria. And we have been attempting to follow closely what is believed to be a very controversial elections that took place here in Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria. And the challenge, of course, as part of the outcomes of that election is that you have two opposition political parties, namely the Labour Party as well as the PDP, heading to court to challenge the elections of the incumbent president, president-elect, I should say, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, whose party, by the way, is incumbent, I wanted to say. And as part of the processes, the political parties have been making their arguments in court. Today has been the turn of the Labour Party. And the Labour Party, as you know, is a breakaway from the PDP, simply because they have their front-runner one time serving as the vice presidential candidate to Atiku Abubakar. They are making a case to the court to possibly ask for a rerun of the elections. And aside the issues of a rerun of the election, they believe that the president-elect should not be sworn in because basically he has not met the constitutional requirements that ought to make him president. So it's been playing out in court. Last week they were here in court. And for those who are not aware of how the Nigerian process runs, what happens is that they do not have their case being called at once in the apex court, which would be the Supreme Court in our case in Ghana. What they have is an appellate system where an appeal is first of all filed, where the court has a maximum of about 100 days or more to make a decision on whether or not their concerns on the presidential election is indeed valid. That's why they call it the Presidential Tribunal. So that's what's been happening today for the Labour Party. So the Labour Party was in court raising a number of concerns about the process itself and challenging the eligibility of the president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But there was a lot of drama today, something that many were not expecting as part of the process. It started off with the courts challenging or indicating that it will not recognize, for instance, the chairpersons of the party. Because first of all, the chairpersons of the party are even fighting amongst themselves, and the party and the courts believe that the only person to recognize in this very case will be the leader of the Labour Party who stood for the presidential race in the person of Peter Obi. Peter Obi, as we know him, is arguably the third force now, and when it comes to Nigeria's presidential election. So he's been making the case to the court that there ought to be a rerun, there ought to be some change in the declaration that was made by the Independent National Electoral Commission of Nigeria. So that's what's played out in court. And we're also getting to see for the very first time that Peter Obi is not necessarily having a smooth ride as it will be, as some of his party members are beginning to draw factions from amongst themselves. And as I was pointing out earlier, the chairperson, for instance, one person holding himself out as the chairperson of the party, and another person also emerging, which is then creating a faction even within the Labour Party here in Abuja. So that also played out. And beyond that as well, we know that the court is set to hear the case of the PDP. So unlike the Ghanaian case where you have both parties and stakeholders filing their responses to the Supreme Court, you don't have that happening in Nigeria. So the political parties, the opposition political parties, are running that separately. So they are hearing the arguments of the Labour Party. They are hearing the arguments of those who are saying the president-elect should not be sworn in because there are just a few more days for that window to expire, because he's set to be sworn in by the 29th of May. So that's the very closest window they have in terms of this week and probably the early parts of next week to stop that. So PDP will be in court tomorrow. And already I've been interacting with some of the leading figures of PDP. I was just speaking to the spokesperson for the Atiku Abubakar campaign, who also ran for one of the governor races in Nigeria. I was pointing out to us that they wouldn't want Ghana, for instance, to even recognize what's happening as far as the outcome of the election is concerned. They want, for instance, President Akufo-Addo, in the event that he's invited to grace the occasion of the swearing in, they want him to boycott that process. They also want other West African countries, other African nations, not to attend the swearing in of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So that's been the argument they are also making on the sidelines as part of their diplomatic moves to try as much as possible to get the regional body, ECOWAS and ECOWAS leaders, to come in and sort of peer review what's happening to the Nigerian democratic process. The belief is that if the likes of President Akufo-Addo and other African leaders attend the swearing in, and we have the courts of Nigeria overturning the ruling, it will be a big conflict for in terms of recognition and diplomatic wise for these West African nations. So the spokesperson will also be making a case, as we'll be showing to you in the coming days, the issue about extremism, the need for democratic stability within the West Africa sub-region. Because mind you, Nigeria is one of the very few of the countries, just like Ghana, holding on to democratic tendencies within the West Africa sub-region. It's the reason for which they believe that the court needs to act fast and to intervene in what's happening when it comes to the Nigerian democratic process.
Right, Blessed, I'm just curious what the mood is like for many Nigerians. We know how it was in the build-up to the elections. There were notable personalities who used social media as a tool to even encourage Nigerians to go for their cards to vote, because there appeared to be a lot of apathy, and we saw that translate even in the numbers at the end of the day. But what is the general sense or general reaction to this case in court?
I've been engaging some voters, both floating voters and those who side with the opposition side. So generally, you get the argument from the opposition side that indeed, even if we're to say that Atiku Abubakar did not win the elections and we did not have Peter Obi win the elections, they doubt if the president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu indeed won the elections. That's the argument. So even if you call for a rerun, I'm sure that the opposition political parties here in Nigeria will be okay with that process because at least it will bring finality to what's happening. In terms of the main voters, the main voter population is, first of all, concerned about the process. Mind you, this is Nigeria. You're dealing with a population of over 200 million, and the voter population is as big as the Ghanaian population and even more. That's the situation you're dealing with. So the numbers are quite huge. I was just talking to one voter who shared this experience with me, indicating to me that when he joined the queue on the day of the elections, it appears that that process ran even into the next day. And that's how tedious the Nigerian election can be. Getting the PVC, the permanent voter card, which we will call the voter ID card in Ghana, is a big deal. It doesn't come easily. So going through the process again and having the courts ask for a rerun will be indeed a challenge, because there'll obviously be the concern about the turnout as to whether or not citizens themselves will want to participate in that process again. So that's another leg of the conversation, but you'd want to look at democratic stability, the fact that you'd want to appease all stakeholders involved in this. And these are some of the issues that I'm sure that the courts will be paying attention to. Don't forget that when you talk about the Nigerian process in terms of how their makeup is, there's a constitutional requirement of how you can be declared winner. So they do not have, for instance, they do not have the case where if you have your 50% plus one, then you are passed for the entire process. At least, for instance, say in an area such as Abuja, you're supposed to get at least some 25% of the vote, get it evenly spread across all the states in Nigeria. That's the constitutional requirement. So it's not a simple majority as we have in our case in Ghana, and that has been a major factor in terms of what's happening here in Nigeria. We're looking forward to tomorrow's proceedings involving the PDP. I'm sure that definitely we'll have the opportunity to interact with some of the leading figures if we do get why he believes this process has been fraught with some challenges.
Right, just for purposes of clarity, before you leave us, Blaise, this case that's going to be heard tomorrow, you just mentioned about that. Is it being heard separately from the Peter Obi case, or this is one case that is being looked at, and then they have different turns to make their arguments?
Right. So the arrangement they have is a presidential tribunal. At least that's the impression I get. I start to be educated more on the matter, but that's the impression I get, that this is a presidential tribunal. It's a constitutional process that has been laid down, which Nigeria is almost used to. So I was speaking to the spokesperson of the Atiku campaign, who indicated to me, for instance, that this is not the first time they are going through such a process, except for Jonathan, Goodluck Jonathan, who in some time past decided not to challenge the presidential election. So Nigeria is quite used to the process where their results are challenged, sort of. You have almost in every election the outcome challenged in the courts. What they have not had in their history is the situation where you have the court saying that the candidate-elect or the presidential candidate-elect has to go for a rerun. That has never happened in the history of Nigeria. And this is how close the country is getting to possibly that situation where the democratic tendencies of Africa's most populous nation is being tested. Mind you, Nigeria matters to the South region, matters to West Africa, and whatever is happening here has some sort of bearing on development in Ghana and other West African nations. So it's the reason for which people are watching, and experts are watching this closely, to see what the courts will decide. There's another leg or strata, if you want to put it, to the process. The next process will be to use the Supreme Court. And that's how unique the Nigerian process is. So you have the appellate system, which happens or runs within less than 200 days, but within a 100-day space. When that process is exhausted and you're not satisfied with the outcome, you're then having the opportunity now to proceed to the apex court, which is the Supreme Court, to make another argument. At that point, the case will be heard within a limited time, much more shorter than the 100 days plus requirement that we have for what's happening now. But this process is interesting because, mind you, there's one party in court asking for the inauguration to be halted. We have one party asking for a rerun. We have also the PDP coming through to say, well, even if we are not the ones who won the elections, there must be a rerun because the constitutional requirements have not been met. So that's the challenge. And on a lighter note, I was just passing by the Eagle Square in Abuja a couple of minutes ago, and it looks quite ready for Tinubu. As to whether or not that exercise will happen is something we need to wait for.
Right, Blessed Soga there joining us from Abuja, Nigeria. He's with the Foreign Affairs Desk, and if you know by now, he runs a show or hosts a show which looks at foreign affairs matters. But today, he's joining us from Nigeria, where he's been monitoring events with regards to that case in court, looking forward to having the elections held in Nigeria earlier this year. Annulled, basically, because we know that Peter Obi's party is asking for a rerun. He will still be in Nigeria a while longer and bring us updates on that. So you want to stay with us? JoyNews, this is your election headquarters. We take a quick breather now. When we come back, we'll be talking about electricity tariff increments. You want to stay for that? Thank you for staying on the pulse. I'm Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah, and the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission has increased tariffs for electricity and natural gas by 18.36% across the board for all consumer groups. The decision was taken after a review for the second quarter of 2023. This is despite government plea for the increment to be waived. Data analyst with the Joy Research Desk, Kofi Ajay, joins me with more. Kofi, here's what I'd like you to do. Break down the figures for us. What will this mean for me when I go to make my next purchase, or whoever's watching us, whether you own a factory, whether you're using it for domestic purposes? What exactly will it mean?
Right, so first we have to understand the genesis of this whole tariff increment. So this is where the whole thing started when PURC last year, Electricity Company of Ghana and Ghana Water Company all went to PURC making an argument that they need an increment in their tariffs. So look at Ghana Water Company. They requested for 334% upward adjustment. They ended up getting only 21.55%. That was just 6.5% of what they actually requested for. There was also, ECG. They requested for 145% increment in the tariff. They ended up getting just to 27.15%. That was just about 18.3% of what they requested for. Now, if you look at this, you realize that there's a sharp difference between what they requested for and what PURC actually agreed to give them. So we've been doing some trend analysis for you to see, and there's an interesting trend looking at all the the upward adjustments we've seen from last 2 years to now. So if you look at 2021, and we are using those who consume between 0 to 300 kilowatt hour, because this is where most Ghanaians are actually found in this domain. So if you are using between this domain, in 2021, you were paying around 65 pesos per a service charge of about 10 cedis. And now that price increased to, that was the first upward adjustment we saw last year in August. It moved from 65 to 89 pesos. And then now we left the peso zone to now cedis. So if you are within this domain that we're talking about, then it means that you're now going to pay about 1 cedi 40 pesos, an upward adjustment of 1 cedi 20 pesos. Just, February this year, that was when PURC did the first quarter upward adjustment, where they moved it from 89 pesos to 1 cedi 20 pesos, and now moving it from 1 cedi 20 pesos to 1 cedi 40 pesos. So what we try to use color codes for you to understand what's really at stake here. So this color code you see on the touch screen is the number of times PURC have either decided to maintain the tariff, increase or decrease. And so if you see the red, it means it's an increase, yellow is a decrease, and blue means no change. I would want us to focus on the 2022. So 2023 actually, this year, we've seen two important upward adjustments. So the first one occurred in February this year, where it moved from the 80 pesewas zone to 1 cedi 20 pesewas, and the current one being proposed, which is supposed to take effect 1st June 2023. So Bernice, if you are consuming between 0 to 300 kilowatt hour, you have to make sure that you either manage or you're going to have an upward adjustment in the amount you pay, as a consumer.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Kofi Ejay, there. But earlier today, I spoke with an official from the PURC, because it's interesting to note what they state in their statement. They actually say this is important because of a high potential of going into the doomsday era again. And so this is just supposed to create a sort of cushion for the utility service providers. They also say that there was some under recovery because of what you just highlighted, Kofi, in the demand of the electricity company of Ghana, which was not met, the 114%.
I think under recovery was actually around 25%, and they do not want to go back to this record again. And mind you, they cited some factors, some reasons why they feel there should be an upward adjustment. The first thing they quoted was the exchange rate. Back then in the first quarter, when they increased from 89 pesewas to 1 cedi 20 pesewas, they made a case that they were using an exchange rate of $1 to 10 cedis and some few pesewas. Now we know the dollar is hovering around $1 to around 11 cedi 70 pesewas or 11 cedi 50 pesewas. So they are saying that they don't want, a case where we'll go back to doomsday or under recovery, where the first quarter resulted in about 25%, under recovery. There's also an increase in the price of gas, inflation and all that. That is the reason why PURC, in just, a span of 2 quarters, have decided to do an upward adjustment of, electricity tariffs.
Thank you so much. Kofi Ejay is a data analyst with a research desk. So if you didn't know, now you know. When you're going to purchase your next electricity, you should budget for a little more, or like Kofi suggested, you may just have to do some home economics.
This will take effect in 1st June, so
so you have a little more time to if you're one of those people who likes to prepare ahead of time, just gather your money and then store it. But it will definitely take effect, if you're on prepaid. Once it's 1st June, there's a recalibration of the system, and so that's by way of information for you. Away from that, the Bloomberg Initiative for Global Road Safety in partnership with the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, the WHO, and its medical partners has organized the periodic UN Global Road Safety Week and the launch of the Accra Retrospective Hospital Report on the magnitude of accident-related deaths and the recommendations to save lives on the city's roads. Speaking at the launch, Mayor of Accra, Elizabeth Kwajo-Saki, emphasized that the report will have a certain impact on the national and local governance system as well. There's more in the following report.
Road traffic injuries are still the leading cause of death and disability worldwide, with around 1.3 million people killed and as many as 50 million people injured each year. The 7th edition of the UN Global Road Safety Week focuses on sustainable transport, in particular, the need to shift to walking, cycling, and using public transport. Speaking at the launch, the Mayor of Accra, Elizabeth Saki, emphasized the effects the report will have on the national and local governments, as well as stakeholders. She revealed that this will give a better understanding of the magnitude of deaths.
Road traffic injuries are still a leading cause of death and disability worldwide, with around 1.3 million people killed and as many as 50 million people injured each year. For people aged 5 to 29 years, there is no greater threat to those lives. This plan aims to inspire national and local government, as well as other stakeholders who can influence road safety as we develop national and local action plans and targets for the decade of actions.
The findings indicated that there were 256 road traffic deaths from 2020 to 2021. That is, pedestrians, motorcyclists, and bicyclists. Road Surveillance Director for AMA BIGRS project team, Bernice Abu-Baidoo, revealed that the way victims were handled will determine their chances of survival, stating that the majority of accident-related deaths came about as a result of the use of improvised means of transportation.
In the event of a crash, the way victims are handled can actually determine their survival, the chances of survival, whether they will die or not. So in one of our hospitals, that's Rage, you see that more than half of the victims, that's 61%, at Rage Hospital were presented through taxis. They were brought in through using a taxi. So clearly, the way these victims will be handled equally would affect their chances of survival. This is actually an estimated figure, given that most of these fatalities that occur do not end up in the records of the police, because most of them, because of prioritizing the life of the victims, they quickly would want to move some of these victims to the hospitals.
In his address, the Acting Director General of the National Road Safety Authority, Engineer David Osafo-Adonting, reiterated the plans the authority has in enforcing road regulatory laws.
We'll have an engagement with the engineers and the police, especially as to how we will be able to effectively enforce Road Traffic Regulation 154 that provides for jaywalking. And we know that it is an offense for anybody just to walk along the road or cross the road haphazardly without due care and attention to road traffic regulations. Don't be surprised that from today and very soon, within this week and beyond, we'll be focusing on how we can enforce this particular regulation in a manner that people who decide to cross the road anyhow, walk anyhow, could be apprehended by the police and then found themselves being prosecuted at the law court.
Now, from road safety, we come to your health. Here's why you need to take your hypertension status seriously. The condition is responsible for some 9.4 million deaths globally annually. But as the world marks World Hypertension Day, founder of the Hypertension Society of Ghana, Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah, has some important information to you, and she's been speaking.
So today is World Hypertension Day, and we are celebrating it all over the world. Now, why should people be worried about hypertension?
Today is World Hypertension Day, and we are celebrating it because hypertension is the #1 contributing factor to global death, according to Limital 2012. And also, it causes death among people. 9.4 million people die globally each year. Yes. Yeah, 9.4 million people die each year from hypertension and its complications. So there is a need for us to celebrate World Hypertension Day to create awareness for people to know that hypertension is a silent killer and it causes this mortality. So there is a need to have yours checked so that you know your BP status. That's the reason why we celebrate World Hypertension Day, to create awareness and also to promote health.
So I guess it's because it's the #1 killer.
Yeah, #1 contributing factor to global death.
That's why we should be worried. What brings about this hypertension?
Okay, thank you. According to research, hypertension has no known cause, but they are contributing factors, things that push one to get high blood pressure or hypertension. One can be age. As you age, your BP increases. Two can be family history. If you're coming from a family that one person is suffering from hypertension and its complication, it means you're also at risk developing high blood pressure. Another contributing factor is lifestyle, like smoking. If you smoke, you can get high blood pressure. If you take in foods that contains high fats and also high salt, you can also get high blood pressure. When you do not exercise, lack of exercise, you can also get high blood pressure. When you do not rest, lack of rest, you can get high blood pressure. When you get pregnant, some people may not have hypertension until they get pregnant. It can also lead to high blood pressure. And people who taking foods that contains a lot of spices, those spices contains MSG, is a chemical that affects an individual's blood pressure. And also when someone has a sedentary lifestyle, like moving from home to work without any exercise, yeah, you can also get high blood pressure. And also people stress. People think a lot. They do not rest. They are bothered about some situation, be it relationship or money, finances. It can also lead to high blood pressure.
So, if you talk about enough rest, you talk about enough sleep, how much is enough when it comes to rest and sleep?
Thank you. At least 8 hours. Rest, some people will be resting but still be using their phones. That's not adequate rest. Some people will be resting but the environment may not be conducive, still watching movie or doing something on their laptops. That's not rest. When you are resting, it means you should be free from any external stimuli. You should give a rest, rest. Yeah.
So on such a day, what's the message from you, the health practitioners, to all of us?
Okay, so the message for this year's May Measurement Month, we call the whole month May Measurement Month because it's the month that we've assigned to have our blood pressure checked. So the message is that the big squeeze, that is, go to any health facility or any pharmaceutical shop that are licensed to check BP, to have the big squeeze, that is for them to check your BP so that you know your status and we can pick it up from there. Because if you check your BP, you know where your level is and we can advise accordingly. If you do not check, it will be difficult for you to know whether you are hypertensive because it's a silent killer and it hardly gives a sign or a symptom.
So if I become hypertensive, how do I ensure that I don't join the 9.4 million people who die every year?
Okay, so if you are hypertensive or even pre-hypertensive, that is, you are not hypertensive, what you have to do is, hypertension is more of lifestyle, so we have to modify our lifestyle. First, all the causes or predisposing factors or the contributing factors that I talked about, like diet, you have to take in a well-balanced diet, more greens and more vegetables, fruits, okay? And you have to reduce your salt intake. And if you are using spices, artificial spices that contains MSG, you have to stop it. You have to stop smoking if you smoke. Those who take in alcohol, you have to reduce the amount that you take in. If you do not rest, you have to rest. Have enough sleep. You have to reduce the amount of fat in your food, and you have to reduce weight if you are obese, because obesity is a contributing factor too. And you have to know your family. If there is somebody in your family who is suffering from high blood pressure or its complications, you have to be careful with how you deal things, you go about things. You have to check how you eat, and you have to exercise so that you check your BP regularly, so that when you get into the hypertensive range, you will know what to do. And if you're on medication, you have to take your medication regularly. Don't stop when it's low. If it's going too low or you are having any problem with your medication, go back to your healthcare provider. There are a range of medications available to treat hypertension, and they can switch it for you. And you also have to free your mind from so many stress. You know, there are lots of things bothering everyone now. Nobody is at peace, but at least create some kind of peace within the stress that you're going through.
Finally, if I don't check, are there any symptoms for me to realize that I may be hypertensive if I see those symptoms?
Okay, so according to research and even on the field, it hardly gives a sign or a symptom. That's why WHO classified it as the silent killer. So in some people, they get signs or symptoms, and at that time most people experience the signs and symptoms when it's got into the hypertensive crisis, that is above 160 thereabouts. So some people experience headache, Some people experience dizziness, others nose bleeding, others hiccups. Some people experience discomfort in their stomach, and others also experience numbness. So they will feel like they can't lift their hand when they assume a particular position, and others may pass out. Yeah. So these are some of the commonest signs and symptoms that people have: palpitations and tiredness. They walk for a short while and they feel so tired. Yeah, fatigue. Yeah. So these are some of the commonest signs that people experience.
All right. So you brought us this.
Yeah.
Maybe we can use it so people will see what we talk about in terms of what you call it, big punch.
BP machine.
No.
The big squeeze.
Big squeeze. Okay, so let's do big squeeze so that people will know. Yeah.
So this is a blood pressure monitor. We have two types, the automated and also the manual one. When you go to most of the government institutions, now they've even advanced using the automated one, the old one that we used to pump it, that metal one, yeah, and this one. So before you check one's BP, you have to make sure that your machine is working and the battery are good. So this is the BP machine, and this is your cuff. You have to make sure that there are no holes on the tube. So we fix it. Put our BP machine, the batteries in the BP machines. Make sure the individual rests at least about 10 to 15 minutes before checking it in order to get accurate reading. So because you are in a suit, we remove the suit. Let me help.
So I have to remove my suit?
Yeah. And mostly it's advisable to check it on the skin so that you get accurate reading. But for demonstration purposes, I will just do it on your sleeve. Yeah. So you make sure that it goes above the elbow, and when you are checking, it shouldn't be too tight because it will cause discomfort for the individual, and it shouldn't be too loose because you may get wrong readings. So you make it normal. The arm is usually put on a table to rest comfortably, and then you press on the start button for the cuff to inflate. At a point, the cuff will deflate and the readings will appear. Then you advise the individual accordingly. A normal BP is 120/80 millimeters of mercury. Abnormal reading is 140/90 and above if it has been checked for more than 3 times. Yeah. And when we are checking, we do not talk. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm having my BP checked to see whether I am healthy or I'm not getting close to hypertension. Let's see what the results will say. Yeah, what do we have?
Okay, because you were talking, it came error. Okay. So it means it's advisable for you to check your BP with no movement.
Okay, so I'll be quiet from now. Let's see.
BP reading that we had may be affected because of the clothing on your, and also so many factors. So let's say the position too. But if you give me the chance, I don't want to share it, but if you want me to share it with your viewers, I should share it. Okay. So the BP is 135/87 and the pulse is 58. So the lower one is the pulse reading. That's the rate at which your heart beats. Okay. So the normal BP is 120/80. When we check it for the first time, it doesn't mean that's your actual BP reading. We need to check it at least 3 times for us to take the average, because it may be that he walked from a distance before sitting down. He has not rested enough for us to get the reading. So I want to entice everybody at home watching us that you should also take this day or this month, as the May measurement month is ongoing. You take advantage and go to any health facility and have your BP checked, because hypertension and its complications is taking a lot of the youth, especially because we think it's an adult condition. Meanwhile, we are victims of these these complications. Please take good care of yourself and take advantage of this year's May Measurement Month and have your blood pressure checked. Thank you.
Need I say more? Betty Ansah has wrapped it all up today. I think if you're not someone who checks your BP status regularly, today should be the day you begin to do that. Like she mentioned, a lot of young people are being taken away. As I'm speaking, I'm sure you're thinking about that person you may know who lost their life as a result of hypertension. Hypertension is treatable, early detection is best, so please use the opportunity to get your status checked. Away from that, the Ghana Boundary Commission is hinting at a possible reconstruction of some boundary pillars which played a crucial role in the 2017 ITLOS ruling, but are currently buried in the beach sand of the Western region. Speaking at the opening ceremony of a joint technical meeting in Ivory Coast, National Coordinator of the Ghana Boundary Commission, Major General Emmanuel Kotia, urged the boundary commissions of the two countries to speed up work with the reaffirmation exercise at Dollar Power in the Savannah region. Maxwell Agbaba has more from Ivory Coast.
The main objective of the meeting in Grand Bassam, Côte d'Ivoire, is to continue discussions on the process of reaffirming the land boundary between Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire by replacing damaged boundary pillars. It is also for the implementation of the 2017 ruling by the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, ITLOS. ITLOS in Hamburg, Germany in 2017 ruled in favor of Ghana in the maritime dispute with Côte d'Ivoire. The chamber, in a unanimous decision, ruled that there has not been any violation on the part of Ghana on Côte d'Ivoire's maritime boundary. It also noted that Ghana has not violated Côte d'Ivoire's sovereign rights with its oil exploration in the disputed basin. Speaking at the opening ceremony of the meeting, National Coordinator of the Ghana Boundary Commission, Major General Emmanuel Kotia, urged the two commissions to consider the construction of a lighthouse in the area to align with the land boundary terminus, which serves as a guide for Ghana's maritime boundary.
Another priority is to adopt and possibly coordinate the reaffirmation of the land boundary terminus. That's pillar 54, 55 on the Ghana side at Newtown. One thing we have realized is that the pillars, some of the pillars have been submerged by the sand. And let's remember that it is the land boundary terminus in that area that was used by ITLOS ruling, and that is where the guiding, that is what guides us so far as our maritime boundary is concerned. We're hoping that this meeting will be able to set up a date as part of the plan of action to be able to go for an inspection of those pillars and decide on possible reconstruction of those pillars. Related to that, we should also be thinking of building a lighthouse in that area. That would serve, if we can jointly seek for funding, we put a lighthouse there that will align with the land boundary terminus. That will serve as a direction for ships and other activities so far as the maritime domain is concerned.
Major General Emmanuel Kotia also warns the two boundary commissions to expedite work on the replacement of damaged pillars along the international boundary line between Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire in the Dollar Power area.
I will re-emphasize on some of the priority areas that we need to look at so far as the Ghanaian perspective is concerned. We think that as a matter of urgency, the two commissions should think of reaffirming the boundary area in Dollar Power as soon as possible in view of the situations both sides have identified. And that should be one of the areas that we should be able to resolve as part of our land boundary reaffirmation. We are also saying that because of the good relationship that we have with Côte d'Ivoire and because of the ruling of the ITLOS, we think that somewhere in November this year, the two commissions should facilitate a joint inspection of the international maritime boundary line between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, with the deep involvement of the navies of both Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Ghana has been able to successfully do an inspection on our side, and I can tell you confidently that there were no violations or breaches found so far as that inspection was concerned. There is, however, the need for us to collaborate so that we can do this jointly going forward as part of the African Union cross-border cooperation. That would enhance the cooperation, that it will enhance the unity, and that will enhance the tenets so far as the boundary commissions of the two countries are concerned.
Executive Secretary of the Boundary Commission of Cote d'Ivoire, Diakalidia Konate, says he's excited about the progress of work by the two countries. He's hopeful the meeting in Grand Bassam will produce positive results that will further deepen the cooperation between the two boundary commissions.
Maxwell Agbagba with that report from Ivory Coast. And before I go, a combined study by the University of Allied Health Sciences and the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology has found 66.67% of females in the Volta region of Ghana are consuming more than the recommended volume of the local alcoholic beverage akpeteshi. The findings were published in a 2023 edition of the journal Scientific African, which established consumption for the local gin not beyond 2 drinks per day. And that's how we end this edition of The Pulse with me, Bernice Abu-Baidoo Lansah. Top story: Supreme Court orders Parliament to expunge James Jachukwison's name from its record as MP. We brought you details from our court correspondent. Also, we were in Abuja, Nigeria, where Blessed Soga is monitoring the election petition case. Do stay with us for details of these and more. There's more when you log on to myjoyonline.com. Thanks for staying on Joy News, your most credible news source. And that's it for The Pulse. Up next is LTS.